On behalf of DaVita and of myself, we are so pleased to sponsor this dialogue with leadership. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, who we heard this morning, Dean Judy Olian.
What a privilege to be with such wonderful leaders, role models, inspiring women who show us the path.
I got my MBA at UC Berkeley and then joined Bank of America, where I had a career for 35 years with 7 different major areas of focus, from running businesses to running functions, and where I had a wonderful, wonderful time. I retired after 35 years, took a year, what I call my sabbatical. I thought I was retired for good, and missed being part of a team and leading people through change. And so in the fall of last year, joined Citibank as the Chief Operating Officer, and in April became the Chief Executive Officer.
So I went to undergraduate school to a women's college. And so it was a 180 from having been in a women's college to being in the business world that was predominantly male, but I stayed true to myself. That's one thing that I promised I would always do. Growing up, my parents instilled that in me, and I did. And so I did not change my behavior because of who was in the room with me. And I was very clear always of who I was and what I valued, and staying true to that is the best advice that I could give to anyone.
After my MBA, I spent 18 years in the banking industry, 15 years with a company that no longer exists by the name of First Interstate, and I spent, after First Interstate was over, when it was a hostile takeover with Wells Fargo, I joined a smaller bank in Los Angeles as its CFO. After 18 years, I then decided I was pretty much done with banking. Sorry, Barbara.
That's okay.
And I found out about this job at Disney, which they were looking for a treasurer, and I said, sure, throw my name in. It all worked out. So I've been at Disney for 15 years, almost 15 years, and it's been a wonderful experience. When people go into new environments, they have to not show how smart they are, be the smartest person in the room, but they really have to assess the dynamics, the relationships that people have with each other. They have to understand both verbal and nonverbal cues. And I think once you understand how to work in those situations, you can move forward quickly. But if you try to assert your point of view all the time, you'll have a very tough time working in a group.
As Judy said, I graduated from Kellogg, and at the time I thought I was going to get into this wonderful brand management career. Ended up down a consulting path instead, and spent 13 years with Boston Consulting Group out of Chicago. Did a lot of work across a lot of industries, some that I loved and some that I hated when I was there. Ultimately ended up running the packaged goods practice for BCG. And then in 2005, I decided it was probably time to go live on the other side of the world, the dark side or the light side, depending upon your point of view. And I left to go work for a client called Danaher. And Danaher, for those of you who don't know, it is a $20 billion science and technology company. Most people would know our brands and our operating companies, not the parent company. And I moved out to Seattle to run a company called Fluke Corporation. So I ran Fluke for about 8 years, and a year and a half ago, at the request of our CEO, moved into a role to run the Danaher Business System Office.
Again, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I worked in every industry. And I learned a lot about what I don't like to do, which is sometimes helpful. When I decided to leave BCG and get what I now call a real job, and people would say, well, what do you want to do? And I'd tell them I can't answer that. I don't know how to answer that, because I don't think about a job title. I think about a set of experiences, and I think about a set of contributions and a set of learning and those kinds of things.
The metaphor I like to use is it's like a piece of stone, and the sculpture exists in there. The role is to chip away until you find it. And so over a period of at least 10 years, 20 to 30, if not then 30 to 45, you are chipping away as to what am I passionate about? What do I have natural talent? Where is there a need for those kinds of talents and passions that I could get paid for it? And I did a lot of that.
Christine, what would you say were the critical success factors early in your career, and what advice would you give people here in terms of going back to that stage of your career?
Going back to my banking days, as I mentioned, I started out in strategic planning. That's a very nice comfort zone for those of you who are getting out of an MBA. The company I worked for at the time, First Interstate, got itself into a bit of a problem. They bought a bank in Texas that was basically bankrupt, and it really put a lot of financial pressure on the company. And the CEO and CFO came to me and they said, you're going to run investor relations. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. They said, oh yeah, you are. I said, no, but I don't know anything about it. And they said, no one else does either. You're doing it. So I stepped into investor relations, into a hornet's nest. I didn't have a lot of mentors in the company because it really was a function that was not done particularly well. And I basically tapped into the networks that I had working through the investment banks who covered me on the treasury side, and I kind of taught myself that function. But it was fascinating. It was one of the jobs I didn't want, but turned out being probably one of the best jobs.
What role, if any, has gender played in your career?
At one point in my career, there was a client, and there was going to be a change of relationship manager for that client, and I was going to be the new one. And he, the CEO, refused to have a woman in the role of a client manager. And the company didn't let that happen. The company said, no, she is who we are assigning, and these are the reasons why, and we would really like you to give it a chance, and if it fails for some reason other than her being a woman, we'll take that into consideration in making a change. And that statement about the company that I was working for at that point in my career was all it took, for me to believe the values and the commitment were real.
And how did he adjust?
Turned out it was a French company. My first call with him was over the phone, and I spoke to him in French because I'm fluent. Want him over like that.
I remember early in the days of consulting, there was this expectation that the women consultants would be the one that would get coffee or lunch because, of course, the men needed to stay to have the important conversations. And one of my favorite mentors at BCG at one point in time, the partner said, I'll go and get lunch because it's more important that Barbara's here and participates in this conversation.
If I was to say one thing, being a woman, the spotlight tends, at least for my career, the spotlight tends to be on you a little brighter than my male colleagues. But you got to remember that you're in the spotlight and perform. And I think if you do that, it can be if you turn it into an asset, I think it can help you out a lot.
At this point in your career, my advice would be jump in with both feet, learn as much as you can, be a sponge, ask questions, look for mentors, be activists, be engaged. I wouldn't recommend that anybody kind of goes by and down the path that's been prescribed for them, because the things that you learn earlier in your career are like investing that dollar earlier, and they're going to blossom and grow exponentially.